Okay, the next microprofile we want to take a look at is health check. Let's go.
So the MicroProfile Health specification is kind of similar to, it goes along in a similar concept to the fault tolerance, where it's meant to be able to indicate whether things are going well, if everything is up, if all lights are green. So you can imagine a company's status page that says, here's the status of all our servers, and it would say, oh, our router here is down, or this location is up, et cetera, that sort of thing. And MicroProfile Health is a way for you to create that sort of thing or participate in a broader one within your application. So what I have here is just a page. This is the standardized endpoint, where if you go to in your NSF XSP app health, you'll see here's all the checks that are available. And here is where and so like there are tools that you could point to this and see, oh, here's all the checks, and it's parsable. Like this JSON format is a known format that is used elsewhere, similar to the microprofile metrics that we had talked about before, where like this is a known thing, and now your NSF can produce this. And what this looks like in practice is that if I go in here, I have a couple health beans. So these are all CDI beans, so I'm saying this is application scoped. And what I'm saying is that this is a readiness check. There are a handful of different concepts, so readiness, liveliness, and startup that come by default with MicroProfile Health. And again, with a lot of these microprofile things, you can ideally, the idealized version is if you have a series of 20 microservices or more that are all participating and all have different states and things like that. And so maybe some of them didn't start up, some of them did. Within an NSF, we're not usually going to break them down like that, but they can come into play in a couple ways. So one of these is just saying I'm a failing readiness check. So here I'm just saying, is this ready? So the idea is this component of your application ready? Most of the time, again, it'll either be all or nothing, but you can imagine, say, like you connect to an external payment processor, you could have this check make a basic query, say, are you up? Like, is this available? And then it could say, if it is, yes, up. Otherwise, no. And so then you could say, okay, users are reporting trouble with the app, look into this, and you have this check that says, the payment processor is down. There you go. Like that helps identify that trouble. So this is a way, again, largely with remote services, where you would say, is this available? You could also potentially say this with, like a different Domino server, or, if there's a database that, I don't know, for some reason on your server is often like somebody's usually messing with it and it's broken or whatever. Or you could have this make a quick call to another application. If you have 10 NSFs and you do just a quick call to the homepage, it's like, oh no, that's, it's currently, the other app is currently not up. So you could have one centralized application that does checks to other apps where the server is up, but other ones might be having a template update. Someone might have opened it in Designer and it's down, that sort of thing. So this is a way that you can build that. But it's also a little more flexible than that. So beyond just being able to say up or down, you can also associate information with it. So here, if I go back to the JSON, I have this check saying this is the liveliness check, and it includes the data of the number of notes in this database. It's just an example metric I came up with. And so what this is doing is saying, I'm going to build a health check, and then I'm going to open the current database, get the count of notes within it, and then include that as additional information. And then if that fails for some reason, then it'll say, oh, there was a failure. Here's the exception. Here's the message from that failure. Number of notes on its own isn't interesting, but something like open support tickets or to-dos or like, vacation requests that a user has to process, something like that, where essentially it is, now you're kind of like moving beyond just health of the system being up and down, but now this can be a tool to build all of your dashboard metrics. So obviously, I would imagine most of the developers listening to this have had a case where somebody said, I want a dashboard of information about the system. And then you go through the whole thing of like, well, what do you want to see? How do you do this? When you get to that mechanism, this can be the way to do it, where you'd say, now I have a check that says this is the open tickets check, this is the vacation request check, this is the whatever, and it could look in the current database, it could look elsewhere and pull in all of these metrics. And then you go to this one dashboard, and tools that will process this JSON will also show you the information that you put out with that. So you could just have a standardized dashboard that reads all of your apps, and some of them will just say up or down. Some of them will say open tickets. Some of them could say, and they could do logic saying, oh, if the number of open tickets is above 50, then consider it down, however you'd like to do that there. And you can include this additional information. And so it starts out as just a yes, no, is this component up, but then turns into a generic kind of reporting and dashboard sort of system. one of the things I'd like to do is that there is kind of a standardized UI. I'm considering adding that in here just as a way to process this. But even as it is, you could imagine having a separate page, could just be HTML, just fetching this JSON and then processing it and then displaying it there. So you can include that in your application as the health check page. Since it would be static, it wouldn't necessarily require other stuff to be up. So being able to get this information and produce it, and then if you start making this part of your tool set so that, for example, you could make it a standard part of all of your new apps, would have health checks. Either would just say, is this alive? Yes. And then start including metrics. As you come into an interesting metric in an app, like, oh, I know that this is a thing that somebody might want to know, make a health check for it, because why not? Then it's available. And so now you can start building up information about all of your apps and start working and combining them together and get more information about this. And now you have reporting just based on, I wrote a class here that uses code that's already in here. You don't have to go out of your way to build this separate thing. So this is the sort of thing that'll kind of pay off the more you can come up with concepts to use it for. And then eventually you'll just have this generic system of reporting on all your different applications.
The UI that you were just mentioning, my mind is now spinning, but that would be a fun project to maybe pull in some community members on and do some group learning, because I've seen a dashboard that our colleague Chris from the board has worked on that is really slick, and it's 100% XPages driven. So that would be a fun project to work on.
Yeah, so this and this is definitely another one of those ones where, like, I'm looking forward to finding places in client work to put that in there, because, like, once I have this capability, now the uses show up, and that should be fun.
So I was thinking that both this and the previous example, as you were first describing it, I was thinking, okay, how do I add this into my app? Like, do I actually have to write this code, or is it a simple matter of I enable it like we showed in the installation video? You enable it in your NSF. Like, it's a matter of being able to collect that data and produce it on the screen. So I got to make this call. Like in this particular case, you're doing a lookup into the database to get the number of documents back. In the other example, though, you're simply returning a string. So okay, you've written some code that calls and returns some value. So you do need to write the code. As much as it's enabled and turned on and able to be used, you've then got to write some code to leverage that capability.
Right, and so the part that the system gives to you is, aside from the interfaces that you implement, it provides the REST endpoint that gives you the check. It provides the categorization, and so it provides those for you. And then the part you're writing is just the contributors to this. So there's an existing framework that says, I will look for health checks. And then if you write a health check, and the idea is that the code you write is just the stuff that handles what is the specifics of the health check, and then the system will handle aggregating that and showing that sort of thing.
That was what I missed, because you had a specific URL there, like you say, an endpoint that's provided,
right.
And that was what I couldn't figure out. So we get that by default, but then we populate the values or the data that comes back.
Exactly. So
Cool.
This app/health is something that's provided by the MicroProfile Health implementation, and it will say, it handles aggregating. Like, it'll find all the checks, and then if any of them are down, it'll say overall it's down. But it will just otherwise enumerate, well, it will either way enumerate all of the checks that it finds, put out their information. So the code you're writing is just, I'm a check in here. The fact that it shows up on a REST service is incidental, and like all of this other stuff, you could access these beans via XPages as well. So if you wanted to write a dashboard, you don't need to consume this JSON as such, because the point is you have a health check system available, and then the JSON is just one of the representations of that. So the code you write are the contributors, and then you can use this system either via the default mechanism or writing your own way to read it.
All right, I've just gotten in line behind you looking for an opportunity to use this. So this is really fun.